the joy or the total destruction of your hopes.
I made my first grader do that this morning.
Watch the TV?
Yeah, because we didn't find out until they were already asleep last night. So he woke up this morning and I flipped on the news and it was on the seas and we're in the Mountains View School District. So I said, I don't know if you're going to have school today. It's pretty cold, but you better watch. And there were so many closings. It took like 20 minutes to get from C to M. And he was like, when is it going to be here? I was like, you can figure that out. It's alphabetical order. Let's go.
That's hearing them read it at the radio.
Exactly.
Yeah, radio.
And he, of course, he just like went crazy.
As we all did.
Hi Brent, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm alright.
Mary, what were you your old can?
I'm getting my vitamin D from an artificial source.
Oh, good for you. Whatever it takes. I thought maybe you went on
It helps,
vacation.
you know, light therapy.
No plane, or what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's warm this time here
Yeah.
in Scott.
No, when I lived in Germany, when you went in for your, when you went to the gym for your workout, they would always ask you, sun or no sun during the winter, because they all had light rooms. You could do light therapy in the gym in northern Germany.
That's good for you.
Because it just gets so darn dark up there. My body didn't know what to do because it was 50 degrees outside, but we were only getting 4 hours of daylight. My body's like, it's supposed to be below zero if it's this dark.
Where'd you go? Palm Beach?
Oh,
It's in Chan.
I
You buy a
use
package?
five, but
You buy a package for
That's all I
like
can do.
$50 and you can
Went to
go.
three.
Hi.
it's called Palm Beach.
Palm Beach.
Okay.
I learned.
Oh. Right there.
Right. So are we flies on the wall or is there opportunity for public input after or during the work session?
I was gonna talk about it at the beginning, but
Okay.
in work sessions, there isn't an opportunity for public comment, so we're gonna be
Right.
talking about things, cause we don't make any decisions during work sessions, we just basically give the background on information.
Right.
If you wanna stay for the meeting, there'll be the opportunity for public comment at the beginning.
I just
Okay.
found a comfortable
So
seat.
you'll address the.
Erin wasn't already sitting
Yeah,
when
it's
I sat
comfortable.
down, so.
Not yet, but you can.
Why don't you sit on that?
No, but like all good Minnesotans, like you try to like not sit
But I
directly
thought it
next
said
to
you could
anyone
come
if
here
there's open
too.
seats,
We
right?
just gotta listen now. 'Cause
Oh,
it's their
okay,
work
I know,
session.
I'm just here to listen.
Yeah, so we're here just to take in what they say and talk about. And then we can comment later, so. We'll roll into the council meeting afterwards.
Exactly. We'll see you there, we'll be there too.
Good. Calendar's open.
All right, it is 5:30. I will call the work session for January 21st to order. Let's see, just for the record, now that we're on air, this is broadcast live, this is taped, it's available on our YouTube channel. But this is our work session and it's, it's where we do our work. We don't really make any decisions. At this point, there are no votes that are taken. If you want to comment, opine, share thoughts and ideas with us, that would be, your opportunity for that is during the meeting, which starts at 7 o'clock and will follow after this one. All right, up first, city manager's report, Mr. Mareck.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So had a little bit of a handful of updates and kind of conversation starters. Prior to the end of last year, I talked a little bit about the Public Works or Public Services project that we've been working on for a number of years. We have a space study that was done kind of during the COVID period and expecting that this was gonna be a major investment for the community at some point. Just talked to the council about engaging with a different architectural firm to kind of redo the space study. If you're gonna be talking about millions of dollars of investment, let's make sure that the data that you get is accurate and is current based on needs. And so as we've been working on this as a group with members of the public services team and some other city staff, as we get to the tail end where we're about to finish it up and present it to the council, I just wanted to check in and see, are there any expectations, i.e. information that you think is going to be critical? What I'm trying to avoid is, and it doesn't mean we'll provide a perfect product, that's not the intention. But if there are big blind spots, like, I thought this was gonna have this information, I wanna make sure that we can try to grab that for you on the first piece. I will say that this kind of, my view of some of the results, it's quite a big departure from the last study, in that Ortel and Paul, I'm gonna have Paul Schultz come when this the space study is put out, but he said this is the most intricate and detailed process he's ever been through on a space assessment, and he's been through a variety of them in his 25 years. So we're talking about space needs that are quite a bit different from the last time, and so in there you'll find, inventory of vehicles, methodology on how they got to space needs. We have space needs for what we have today, what they believe that we need today, and then incremental, like what you need for in 20 years, what you need in 30 years, what you need in 50 years. They have some generic, kind of what I call like site plans that aren't specific to a property, but show kind of, I'd call them kind of like, think about Lego blocks. This is how you could stack the Legos together to get the space that you need. And then some preliminary scoping costs. So that's kind of the ingredients of that space study. But if there are, whatever those things are out there that you think, well, I'm gonna need to know this, we'd like to be able to try to get that for you on the first go around, so.
For me, I think what you outlined is kind of what I'm anticipating we'll be getting. I think 3 of us, you were on the council when we got the first space study. So I think, like in my mind's eye, I like your Lego analogy of like, this is where our 3 plow trucks will go, in understanding that these are not architectural drawings, but I almost kind of want to see like, this is the space that we need for what we have right now. Then we know, because of our 10-year financial plan, we're gonna be buying another plow truck and I'm pulling this out of thin air, I don't know, but in 2030, so we're gonna need an additional, whatever space for that. So that's what I'm looking for from that, is kind of a number of square footage, and then like the full build-out probably size of what we're gonna need in 2050.
Yeah, so they have our current inventory, they have our 10-year equipment plan and our 10-year staffing plan. So they have an idea of the bodies and the equipment. And I should add, we're going into this with the expectation that there isn't like a project date. We're starting kind of from scratch, meaning like we're giving you the flexibility to do so, meaning that you'll see this space study and you might say, okay, this works, but we need some more runway to like integrate this into our long-term financial plan. We can't, change a square footage by a factor of 2 and then say, okay, we're gonna build it next year. So if there's any anxiety about like, well, when are we gonna build it? Like, you'll decide that at the time that you think is appropriate, but I think what we're aiming for is, can we all agree, like at least starting with the council and then moving on to the community, can you agree to the space that's needed and anticipated to be needed? And then you can all kind of debate from that same sheet of music, if you will. But that's our goal in any event.
Any Christine thoughts?
No, I'm good with all that. All right, I have a thought and a question. Will you remind me, did you say it was Wold?
So Wold did our original study in like 2020. And after some experiences that we've had recently with them, and then in consulting with some colleagues throughout the metro, Ortel came pretty highly recommended. We actually used them for a space assessment, I would say probably in 2014, 2013, primarily geared towards city hall space needs. Actually, the architect who was kind of the working architect on that project is now the president of Ortel, and we've been fortunate enough where he's leading the space study on this side for us now. To answer your question.
One of my 2 questions. The other one, more of a request, that it would be helpful for me to see what projects they've done for other municipalities. So I don't expect them to go out to like peer cities and ask like what their square footage is or how they use this, but if they already have it, the information from projects they've done, just to be able to say, oh, like, you know, this is, and what other public works, public services have done and why.
Right. We can do that. We've also, that's a good comment related to other cities. We do plan on kind of reaching out. Just as an example, I reached out to Shane Finneran in Waconia and just asked, you know, how many square feet they had and when they last built. They last built in '08. I don't remember their exact square footage offhand, but, you know, the abridged version is they're looking at building a whole new facility because they're busting at the seams.
Okay.
And they're not even 20 years out from their original. And that's not to say that like there's a prescribed, like this is what you should build, otherwise you're a fool, but
yeah, things
there's
like
a lot
that
of
that
pressure
maybe learned from other
on.
clients or like,
Pardon,
you know,
yeah.
existing state, what other
Right,
examples are.
Ortel did the Waconia facility, that's an example, but we'll get a background for you that can be added to the main report.
Okay, that was it, thank you.
Kayla, does that fit your expectations for the space study?
It does. I'm looking forward to seeing plans for how we can make sure that the space works for the useful life of the building.
The only other thought that I had when you used the Laconia example is I hope to see something, it's my desire that this lasts for a long time, so I kind of don't want to see a conservative estimate on what we need for space, just knowing how quickly our community is growing. I want to see like what will absolutely fit everything we have, and Paul Schultz will be able to open the door, and the rest of our public services team will be able to open the door and also get out of the vehicles.
Right.
So.
And I think that's the beauty of their process, is it removes some bias in that they use a formula based on, like, it's not just the truck will sometimes have a plow on it, and the doors are gonna need to be open, and they're gonna load, so like
There's a wing and.
it's kind of providing kind of like sometimes they'll call it the envelope. It's just, yeah, you put the truck inside the envelope, but there's a bigger space that's needed beyond just the physical dimensions of the truck. Moving on, I'm gonna be sending out some requests for dates of availability. So one of the things that we do every 2 years is kind of look at our strategic plan and goal setting for the council. So our current city plan runs through 2026, so this would be kind of a, you know, it's not a full tear down and build of our existing plan, but it could be if that's what the council wanted. But it's, what we have is designed to kind of go over our goals, give you a sense of kind of the conditions of the community from department head's perspective, and then if there are specific goals within the next 2 years that the council has for staff or as a community that you'd like to get after, that we'll set up a process for that. We've preliminary engaged with a facilitator, Phil Kern, who does a number of projects throughout the metro for goal setting and strategic planning. He's also the city administrator in Delano. So I'll send that out. Downtown
Do you
restaurant.
have a month you're thinking?
I'm thinking probably more like March, April-ish, just so you know, the council can get a rhythm and kind of get some projects. But if you want to do it sooner, we certainly can. One of the things that I'm trying to plan for is each of the department heads would do kind of like an environmental scan of kind of their part of the community, and I want to make sure that they have enough time to prepare that. But if there's feedback on getting it done sooner than later,
No, that's not what I was going for. I'm gonna be out the last week in February, so we can't do that one for sure.
I'd love to do it sooner rather than later, but I think if we're talking February, March, I get that we probably need staff to have some time to put some thought into their product.
I prefer not February.
Right.
She's
We're talking
March, April.
Yeah, March, April is what I'm considering sooner.
Oh, okay. You just said February, so it wasn't.
Oh, I'm
February.
sorry. I
That's
know.
why I was confused.
I'm thinking March. Okay, I'm thinking what Brent said, March, April.
then we haven't done this for I think 10 years as well. That we have an application for a downtown restoration program grant from the Doghouse. It's a little unique. In talking to Brian, the owner of the Doghouse, just because of his experience level with kind of dealing with kind of processes and programs that we have here. we had a miscommunication on, you know, applications and so on and so forth. So I told him that I would support, even because they started their project, and typically that would be kind of the deadline. You wouldn't apply for a program after you've started your project. They're not finished. They haven't had their final inspection. And so I believe that meets the intent. So I've been working with the city attorney on preparing paperwork. Basically it's a $2,500 forgivable loan that has to be matched dollar for dollar, which I think obviously their project exceeded well over $2,500. So we're going to be bringing that to your February 3rd meeting. The fire station construction project is moving along. The internal part, so that's the SCBA kind of, or not SCBA, turnout gear kind of locker room will be done March 1st, and then the HVAC and roof is planned to be done June 1st. We're working with 2 property owners, one kind of the school district, and then the other the Wickenhauser family, for the extension of Commerce Drive, so that's the road that runs north and south past Lakeview Industries. The school district bought 20 acres for a future transportation facility in that area. The Wickenhausers, I believe, have someone close to moving forward on an industrial development. So we need to work with them on developing an alignment for the construction of Commerce Drive, utilities, street configuration, and so on. And so, again, the city attorney and Erin Schmidt are working together on a agreement that both of those parties would pay the engineer's office to prepare that feasibility study, and so we get an understanding of costs. There could be a likelihood that they might ask the city to construct that road and then assess those costs back to them. In some instances, I believe this one would be an example too, that becomes more efficient for the city to do the project. But in order to understand kind of the details of that, we need to understand the cost, the alignment, etc. So
If we were gonna charge them back, over what period of time?
you'd have to decide that. So, you know,
Yeah.
typically it's 10 years.
It'll be
You've
a
done
deal
as much
point
as 20.
in the negotiations with them, so I think the city has a lot of leverage to, if they wanna do this, we'll build it, but we do it on our terms, so
Okay.
we'll have those discussions as we proceed with them.
And we just have a really rough cost estimate. The feasibility study will tell us close to what it might be, so the parties will have that information to see if they can cover it or if they'll ask the city, so.
Okay.
A helpful piece of the puzzle.
Okay, and then what do we do for funding for that? How do we get the funding on our side to?
So the upfront fund, just like you would for like a regular like residential street project, you bond through a 429 assessment process that doesn't count against our debt load, and then whatever that cost is. So let's just say, you know, you borrowed me $100 or lent me $100 for Erin and I to pay back, you know, that we would split that cost over whatever period at no cost to you. We cover the interest, the engineering, the issuance costs, etc. within the term of the debt.
So we don't as a city charge additional interest for basically securing the loan for them?
We
Or is it
typically
dollar for
would,
dollar
it would be one, usually it's 1 or 2 percentage points
2%.
above what
Okay.
we are paying, because there's cost that comes to that, so the city is made whole. But, to Brent's, I think you guys have used 2% in the past, which is not uncommon. I've seen that before, and that usually makes
Okay.
sense. And then
Alright,
they
so
pay it
it's-
back annually on their tax assessments.
Okay.
And then the interest rate is a little more, so that we're covered to make sure we can.
And they haven't
Okay, that
formally
service.
requested that. They
Oh.
may choose just to build it on their own. Sometimes people can do it a little cheaper and quicker than the city can because of all our public hearing processes, etc.
But if they did that, we would have an agreement, and our engineers would still have to review plans and go through our typical development process, which we're used to, but for some reasons, I think there's a few efficiencies that would come with the city doing it here, and I know Brent and staff have been talking about that, so
Okay.
we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
We'll have to
We'll wait and see.
hold.
The Carver Bluffs HOA is working on a tree removal project along Carver Bluffs Parkway. They have some diseased trees. Normally, if it was a smaller section, we'd just go through our right-of-way obstruction permit process, which we'll probably still do. We're still kind of working out the details. But because of the kind of the size of it, I want to make sure the council gets a good line of sight to the project. It's a major corridor into that neighborhood. There's street closure from likely Bluff Park all the way up to Ramsey Avenue. And just want to make sure that the communication and coordination are up to your expectations. I mentioned during a staff meeting today, there's just a little bit of kind of experience related to this. When MetroNet came through the community and did their project, it's not our project, but residents reached out to us as kind of a first point of contact. And even though the HOA is involved, I just want to make sure that we have good line of sight that if they say the project is going to take 1 day and it lasts 1 week, how were we prepared for that? Where was the notice out? Who do they contact, et cetera?
So it's on the HOA to communicate that to everybody in that neighborhood about a road closure?
Well, that's kind of what we're going to be sorting through.
Okay.
They're requesting what's called an obstruction permit under our right-of-way ordinance, which typically it requires staff and administrative approval. We can tie conditions to it and make sure that they have an access plan and all kinds of things in place to make sure if we're closing a portion of the street down, that it's not going to disrupt the everyday lives of our residents. And so Erin Schmidt is working with them on those plans and reviewing those plans. And I think to Brent's point, he just wants to make sure the council's in the loop and is okay with everything because, as we all know, Murphy's Law, if it can go wrong, it will, and your residents are going to be complaining. Who are they complaining to? Probably you, if they're upset about things. So we just want to, again, make sure that everybody has a say and understands what's happening before it happens. I think a lot of projects, especially emergency projects, require street closures and they happen without council action in certain circumstances, but we have enough runway here where we can bring it to council and the good news is they're taking down like 17 to 20 diseased trees that have emerald ash borer. That's not good, and if that doesn't happen, they can become dangerous and fall on cars or people or other things. So we're working with them, and it'll be before you, I think, at the next meeting.
Okay. I just want to make sure there's a plan to communicate to residents. I know
That will be their job too.
the
Yeah.
associations are wonky in there. Some parts are association, and then across the street it's not association. So I just want to make sure that there's not a ooh, that's not the association,
Yeah.
but that
Because we'll
everybody's-
notice it too as a city to the rest of the city, is that the intent?
Correct. Because there's more than just those residents that use that road.
I have a question, and Erin, maybe you can help answer this too. So there has long been a desire to have a trail from the Bluffs Park up that parkway to the neighborhood. So with these trees coming out, does the HOA itself have any plans on putting a trail in? Does this leave room now? If they don't, obviously the city has not set aside any plans or money for something like that. Is it something we can look at a grant for to see if we can get it up that road?
We've talked about it, in relation to Creekside Park, what it would take to connect Creekside across that HOA property. I know we've talked, a city project on HOA property is arduous, it takes 90% of the residents within the HOA. But we could absolutely at least talk to the HOA, see if that's something they'd be interested in doing. It would benefit the Bluffs residents greatly. So I don't think it could be a city process on their property, but we could absolutely approach the HOA and just say, would you think about this?
Yeah, the issue is that we need a trail easement or a public right-of-way easement to be able to put public trail there. And if it were a private landowner that was on board, it would be easy. They would just, grant us an easement, we'd record it. But their HOA bylaws are written in a way that requires, to Erin's point, a certain percentage of their members to approve it, and they can't just deed land or give land to the city. So it's more complicated and requires some, I think, there's red tape from the HOA's perspective that we don't really have control over. We could always, I don't think the council is in favor of initiating eminent domain for this kind of thing. It's if they're willing to do it, we'd be willing to do it, but
Correct.
That's how it
Correct statement. Yeah, I just was curious, because it's a long stretch of road. We've heard about it for 20 years, that from the park up to the rest of the development has a hard time because there's no trail or sidewalk or any of those things. And so people, if you drive up there, they're walking down in the street, and then they have to hop up onto the grass. Again, it's not there, it is their property. I just didn't know if they had any intentions of doing something like that,
Yep.
or something that we could just talk to them about, maybe where there's opportunities that we can work together to get something in there.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Moving on, the Carver Community Development, Carver County Community Development Agency is hosting a kind of a, I would say like a goal setting session on February 4th. I sent out a flyer. Erin and I are gonna be attending that. There's been some recent board conversation regarding the county's role in economic development. And I believe that's gonna be a topic of conversation at this February 4th gathering. Traditionally, that work has been done by the cities, but there's an interest, at least by some of the members of the board to kind of get involved. I don't know what that means or what that looks like, but it's I would say a new sphere of conversation that we really haven't had to deal with or has been brought to us. So just wanted to get that on your radar. If there's any specific comments that you have either now or in the future related to that, I'll keep you updated as far as what occurs at that meeting. I'll skip the new housing development and do that last. So we have commission interviews. We have like 9 applicants, 8 for planning commission, 1 for HPC. Because of the number, we've had success doing that on an off meeting night rather than trying to jam that into a work session agenda. So threw out a couple of dates. I don't know if they work on your calendars, Monday, February 10th or Monday, February 24th. We typically would start like at 5:30, and I think we did increments of either 5 or 10 minutes in the past. So just wanted to see if either of those would work for you, then we can get started on notifying the applicants.
The 10th does not work for me, and the 24th could, maybe. What time are you planning to start?
Like 5:30.
Because we'll be coming back from out of town that day, so I could possibly be here that night. But the 10th is an absolute no for me.
I can make the 24th.
I can make the 24th. I can do the 24th. Can you text Eric just to see what he's available for?
Yep.
Because I think if it's just the 3 of us on the 24th, I prefer to find another night that works better for
I can-
most.
The 24th should work. I mean, barring a broken down car or something like that on the way home. Yeah, let's not, it's
Back to Carmel?
Yeah, let's not do that. That should work.
Okay.
And then the last thing, and I might toss it over to Erin, but just wanted to give you a line of sight. I know that I've shared this previously, but we've met with D.R. Horton a number of times, so they've have purchase agreements on the former John Lenzen property, or Ruthie Lenzen, and then part of the Hammers property, so it's a combined 300
Yeah.
plus acres. So very preliminary at this point, but Erin Schmidt, Erin Smith, the whole kind of development team has been meeting, but I would say throughout the course of the year, you'll see petitions for annexation, concept plans, neighborhood meetings, preliminary plat, final plat, all the things that you see, but this is a pretty significant development piece, kind of extends past the midway point between 11 and 43. We've connected with Carver County as it relates to kind of where the future Monroe Drive extends and lands onto County Road 43. And then in our comprehensive plan, it contemplates a kind of a bridge flyover kind of at the midway point between 11 and 43 over 212, so no access onto 212, but as a collector reliever. So they've hired a engineering firm, SRF, to verify if there's still a need for that. That would go in with the project, but the right-of-way might be preserved for a bridge that goes in 50 years from now. But when you have a piece that is this big, you can imagine there's a whole lot of environmental reviews. I don't know if this is going to have an EAW, but this will be a pretty big conversation piece into 25 and likely into 26.
People know what an EAW is?
I do.
Okay.
Thank
We're
you.
talking acronyms, so.
I know, and you know how much I hate acronyms.
I have a question, what do we know about like, that water feature? beach, or is it a lot of wildlife? Is it like truly filtering things, or
Or
is
the
it?
same thing as a swimmable?
Is it swimmable, or is it just
Skatable?
kind of the way the farm fields were plowed, or
Yeah,
what do we know about it?
it's interesting because the old rail corridor you can see runs through that pond.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
I would say it hasn't always been there, but
That's
as
a
we
good
start
indicator.
learning more about the project, like the EAW will tell us a lot about it. Right now in concept plans, DR Horton is not proposing to touch it at all, so I suspect it'll become part of their system, but based on where it is, like in the middle of farm fields, I'd say it's probably not a luscious swim pond by any means.
Alright,
We'll save the question about sledding hill for the next time.
No, I said, is it skatable?
Oh, skatable.
Yes, you know that sledding hill is always on my
Yes,
list.
yeah.
alright,
Even on the border.
Throw me off.
All right, the fun starts now.
Actually, can we just do council requests before we have too much fun? I did have one thing, although I do want to put a pin in it, but maybe just to get us all to start thinking about. Brent sent out an email earlier this morning, and now I'm trying to find it, where I just wanted kind of everybody to start thinking about league offerings. There is the Elected Leaders Institute. I know that Kayla has signed up to go to the one down in Mankato. That's always an option for you guys, and really, really good programming. The advanced program, for folks who have been around a little bit, is being offered in Plymouth and in Alexandria this year. The one in Plymouth, I think, is the end of February, and then Alexandria might be a week or two after that. And then there is the Day on the Hill, which, if I could find that email, it would say that it is, I think it's March 6th. But I think we've always worked pretty hard to make sure that we don't have a quorum at that, and just kind of wanted folks to kind of be ready and kind of check their schedules maybe for our next meeting, so we can kind of figure out who's going where. And then there's also the league conference, which is the end of June, and it will be back in Duluth again. So that's my request, is just check your calendars, we'll talk at our next meeting. All right, now let's have some, unless there are any other council requests.
No.
All right, I agree, let's have some fun.
Okay, good. You gave me time to get my display actually fixed.
Oh, but we get to see your kids.
I know, but it's tough to do it both ways.
It's gonna be hard to do the fun
Alright.
after that.
Okay, I didn't do it. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about the zoning code update, which the planning commission has been doing such a good job on, in my personal opinion. So we're gonna stay pretty high level tonight. The document is definitely a work in progress right now, but just wanted to hit you with some of the headlines that we've been working through at the planning commission level, get some feedback, talk about some big things that they've been tackling. So why are we doing this? Zoning codes are always working documents. As you know, throughout the year, we adopt, change, get rid of ordinances as we see fit. The zoning code is no different, but it's kind of a bear. It's a big document. There are implications throughout it that if you get rid of one section, it might impact several others. So changes and updates can happen at any point. This is the biggest revision that we've done on a grand level in probably 10 plus years. So it's important to do every so often. There are changes in markets, trends, staff development. So if the Carver City Code is, say, 10 years old, Carver looked really different in 2015 than it does in 2025. So there's been a lot of changes in what has been happening, both private market and the work that we're doing at a city level. Several sections are really clunky. So like there are sections of the code that haunt me, specifically like the fence section is really hard to read. That it's something that a lot of residents probably are thinking about, but it's hard to read and figure out what applies to your lot and what doesn't. So one of the main goals of this and the work that the Planning Commission is doing is to make it understandable and easy to process. There's no harder conversation that I have than with a resident when I'm trying to read the code and it's like, well, I don't really know what that part means. So hoping to make it clearer, easier to understand. And then the updated comp plan should include updated zoning regulations. So should happen more often than it probably does. But here we are tonight working on it. So the Planning Commission, again, has been doing this work since 2023. They've been doing such a good job. It's been long. Some of our meetings have been pretty boring, but they truly have they've done a really nice job. They're really invested in the process. So Those include many hours of discussion, feedback, and even some laughs and fun. And I truly mean that. Krista Goodell she has a degree in technical writing, so she'll sometimes catch me on stuff and it's like, I'm not even thinking about what that period looks like. So it's been really helpful and great to get that group looking at it. The Planning Commission has completed sections 50-1 through 50-70, which is 43 total pages of revised code. And then any feedback the council provides will go back to the Planning Commission. We'll keep discussing, keep working on the document. So our goals for the work session tonight: receive feedback on big picture items. Know that the document is a work in progress. I shot this over to Natalie Meyer a couple weeks ago and said, like, help me not embarrass myself with how this document is formatted. So she's done a ton of work. Once we're in a spot where the city council says, great, continue on, I'm probably gonna enlist Brenda as well and Natalie to do some additional cleanup. They both are kind of our spell check, grammar gurus, so getting some expertise in our office. And then some general cleanup will continue through the process. So the headlines, the things that we're thinking about on a large scale: general readability and cleanup. So a lot of our code feels antiquated and it feels like we are trying to outsmart ourselves, which is a little bit tricky. So hoping to make the information more readable, so changing things like shall to must, making it more conversational. Formatting throughout the document is a nightmare right now. You can tell pieces that were added that are just formatted differently. Personally, as a person who does not care about details, I've never noticed it. But people who do care about details are like, this thing is hard to read. So formatting is going to be important. Ease of read and cutting jargon is one of our main goals as one of the headlines. Number 2, this is where it gets kind of meaty and some more information. So we've been talking a lot about residential lots and our current zoning districts. So again, lots has changed in the city of Carver since the zoning code was written and last revised. There are some districts in our city code that frankly don't make sense anymore that should be removed. So one of those is the residential unsewered district, which right now there's some properties on Diedrich that are zoned that, the residential unsewered, but as you all know, we just went through a sewer project a couple years ago, they are sewered. So we should get rid of that zoning district probably because it does not describe the properties that are there. So I know there was a question at the council level earlier today, like what happens to those lots? We would take a look at them and have them rezoned to what zoning district they most closely match. So if that's R1 or R2, so it won't be lawless land of no zoning. We would rezone those properties to one of the zoning districts that closely matches the type of lots that are there right now. The Planning Commission's also been talking a lot about our relationship with a PRD or a planned residential development. So a PRD creates, as you know, an independent ordinance for each neighborhood. So if someone is looking for the zoning of their property, they can't go to the city code and look and say, oh, I live in an R2 development. They typically live in a PRD. And those ordinances are part of our city code, but they're hard to find. So PRDs can be a little bit confusing and challenging to track down. So depending on what our map looks like, if someone looks and says they live in a PRD, you have to track down that specific ordinance. And then people in our seats typically have to know why the PRD happened. Was it for smaller lot size? Was it for reduced setbacks? What was the thing that triggered that PRD? So it just makes the process a little bit clunkier. Doesn't make it bad by any means, but it just is a process that we do fairly regularly that I've been thinking a lot about, like what is the merit of our zoning code if we're continuously doing PRDs, if we're continuously having people ask us to change one of the parts of our zoning ordinance to allow for a project. So our most common PRD request is smaller lot size, reduced side yard setback. And again, any section in the residential table sets minimums. So we can say our minimum is 10 feet. Someone could come in with side yard setbacks of 15 feet. That probably wouldn't happen, but you could. So again, remember that these are minimums. So here's the residential table that's in our city code today. So the RUS is the residential unsewered. You can see the minimum zoning lot area is 2.5 acres, which property off Diedrich is obviously not that, it's a neighborhood. So a lot of this is just not applicable. I don't anticipate that the setbacks would change. They mirror pretty closely, like the front yard setback, side yard setback, rear yard to the R1 zoning district. So we would get rid of that district, likely rezone them to R1 since they seem to fit those requirements. But it gets rid of some of these strange requirements like the 2.5 acres.
So everything on this table is what we currently have?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then the residential unsewered right now is that weird part of our code that says you can have one animal equivalent unit. which in our code is like 15 chickens or a goat or a horse, which obviously seem pretty inappropriate in Carver today. So cleaning up some of that, getting rid of the residential unsewered.
If I get my horse now, is it grandfathered in?
Not where
If
you
you
live.
go to my house. So thinking about the zoning of the city right now, feeling out which districts are often used, like what the market is demanding lately, you can see that R2 is really popular, so that includes Meridian Fields, Timber Creek, Oak Tree, Hawthorne Ridge, and then some of the bluffs is also R2, and Meadows at Spring Creek, and Brookview. So thinking about that, R2 is the district that the market is calling for right now. Developers are seeing that there is success there. They're asking us to rezone properties that come in the city from ag to R2. So that's just anecdotally the most popular zoning district. You can also see on the screen now that residential unsewered district, where everything, it's that blue in the center, where everything should be 2.5 acres, which the whole area might be 2.5 acres, and there are obviously several more homes there.
Can I add one thing too? So, but your point about the PRD, I think is a good thing to keep.
Oh, hang on.
Okay. Oh, those are all our
Yeah.
PRDs?
There's a question, okay.
Yeah, because just the way I think about this, and I know council, some of you have a lot of experience with planned residential developments, others less, but there's an underlying zoning district, so it's like R2 is what we look at for the rules, what apply. But then there's a PRD overlay, which gives them the right to have whatever flexibility the city council granted at the time the PRD was approved, right? To Erin's point, a lot of times it's setbacks or minimum lot size, that's what we give leniency on. But there's always an underlying zoning district, and I think to Erin's point, R2 is clearly the most utilized
Yeah.
residential district from a single family development perspective in the city, so I don't mean to jump in and
Yeah, sorry I glared at you. That was a
clarify
joke.
that. I just think it's helpful, because I always like to think of that like overlay district as being special, a couple of special rules that apply, but otherwise it's our R2 district that,
Yeah.
and rules that would apply to that property, so.
So on the screen now, all the checks are where we have approved or PRDs. So I'm gonna toot my own horn a little bit, but if someone else were in my seat trying to figure out what all of these PRDs were for, can be a little bit challenging to know, like Timber Creek was PRD because it was a mix of housing types. They did a reduction to 5-yard side setbacks, reduction in lot size. Carver Ridge is the increased density, so that's a PRD, mix of housing types. But again, you'll start to see really common themes that the reduction to 5-foot side yard setbacks and reduction in lot sizes have been so popular. Those have been a majority of the PRDs we've approved in the past several years. So thinking about that, I've been contemplating with the Planning Commission, what does it look like if instead of this PRD process in that R2 zoning district, we go down to the reduction to the 5-foot side yard setback minimum and a reduction in the lot size. And jump scare to the Planning Commission, we started, I threw out a very low number for minimum lot size, and they all looked at me like I had two heads. So we came to a happy medium. They brought me up a little bit. So thinking about setbacks, we did a little bit of research at the Planning Commission level. So the top is the R1 zoning district, the bottom is R2, what we're at right now. So what is proposed in the R2 district right now is 5,000 square feet for lot size. So I will say I spoke with the community development directors in this cohort of cities that we often compare ourselves to, and I asked, like, what are you thinking about for your zoning code? What are you thinking about for lot size? And they all are contemplating the same question because the market is demanding smaller lot sizes. And they also told me that I can be the sacrificial lamb to try to first and see how it goes and then report back. But just thinking about how often we're doing that PRD for the same things consistently, do we just make our code consistent with the request? So looking at that, the R2 zoning district typically falls in our low density residential and medium density residential. It floats between those two if it's a single family product. R2, you can go up to a duplex. So on the screen now is our comp plan. The taupe brown color is anything that's an ag preserve, so don't take that as a residential district. But anything in the yellowish color, the lightest yellow is low density, and then as you progress through the darker yellows, it's higher density uses.
Erin, would you mind to share with the council just like little bit on the Met Council's work to change density requirements, because I think that might inform their future decision making on this topic.
Good call. So the 2040 comprehensive plan, low density residential for us meant 3 to 5 units per acre. The Met Council is doing work on their local community handbook that would increase low density residential to a minimum of 4 units per acre. So it would be likely 4 to 6 for us in the low density category. We have had a lot of conversations with our sector rep Mackenzie and Deb Barber with the Met Council, talking about impacts that would have to the city of Carver. If you are tracking news at all for the city of Carver and development, it's a pretty hot topic right now. There are a lot of communities that are talking about it. The feedback that I got from Mackenzie, our sector rep, is that they may change the way that they look at platting, where it wouldn't be a plat by plat basis, so it wouldn't just be Timber Creek, it wouldn't just be Oak Tree, it could be community wide. So as you can see, the average net density in Carver based on our 2040 comp plan is 3.65 units per acre, which they would round us up to 4. So if that is the intent that they choose to move forward, our current plan would meet that intent. Not all communities are falling in that same situation. So if you're familiar at all with Chaska planning, they have some area called a green belt where their density is really low. So their density plummets a little bit lower than ours does. But the net density would be citywide, so across our high density projects, across our medium density, across our low density. I hope that holds true. The Met Council, I think, has a meeting next week to talk about it, so we are anxiously awaiting their decision. But if it does increase to 4, we likely are going to continue seeing small lot development with reduced side yard setbacks to increase density in projects.
And the leverage Met Council has is all of our sewer goes through their processing, so they won't issue a sewer permit for developments if we can't meet their density. So I think everyone, through some type of experience, has heard from somebody about small lots or.
You mean Christy Ma?
And you're one of those. So I think, that'll be an opportunity for us for council, for you to kind of advocate for whatever position you have, but then a responsibility or opportunity for us as staff to communicate that as this process goes, that it kind of feeds into some of your legislative priorities about local decision making, that it's been said that sometimes the Met Council looks at things as a one size fits all, and so like there are nuances between suburban communities, even though maybe some don't think so, and so opportunities for advocacy in this area and real impacts to our community here.
Erin, I have a question. On the slide, so we're at the 3.65 units per acre, and that is the total of the city, all factored into one. Now, we have 2 more high-density buildings going in here. How does that factor into those? Are either of those in that number yet?
Yes.
Both of them
So-
or one?
Both. So this is based on our entire growth area, so that's not everything that's existing in Carver today, it's our whole growth area.
Okay.
But we anticipated Carver Place and Carver Oaks with that medium density that it was zoned as, so it's included here.
Okay.
I know Met Council is still working through all this, Erin, but I'm just curious what the planners are hearing. Can you include the growth area when you're making these calculations, or do you have to just include city limits, or where do you think they're gonna go with that?
I hope that they go growth area because we hit some high density
Yeah.
at some major intersections that would help us through some of these spaces. Like in our meetings with D.R. Horton, they're already struggling to hit density for the project because there are some challenging areas on that property, like the topography is pretty wild. Getting streets into the site gets a little bit tricky based on some of the topography. So if you think about the project, D.R. Horton right now is proposing 498 units, and they're struggling to hit 3 units per acre. So what does that mean in 3 years when I say you have to hit 4? Like, how small will those lots be? Do we have to include some apartment facility? Like, what does that look like? So I hope it's a one-stop checkbox that we can say our growth area covers it, but.
Or they can build some smaller homes that fit in the size of the lot,
Right.
rather than these monstrosities.
Yeah.
Or attached townhomes or
Right.
other things?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I hope it's our growth area, but we'll learn more in the next couple of weeks.
I have a question too on Met Council's process. Like roughly, do you know when they make the decision and then like when we need to
Yeah,
adhere to
so
if there was a
it'll
change?
be our next comprehensive plan process. So we'll likely start that in 2026, 2027 with adoption in 2028.
Okay,
That'd be the 2050
Right.
comprehensive.
okay.
So we wouldn't have to change, we wouldn't have to meet those requirements until that time.
Correct. Yep. But it is tricky, like DR was asking already, like, are you set at 3 for the low density residential? And based on our plan, we have to be, like, we don't have much wiggle room here to go lower because we don't pick it up elsewhere. So that was the nice thing about the 2 CDA projects over the past couple of years is that it's helped some of our density balance.
Some, yeah. Credits as far as density goes.
Right. And we might get a couple high density projects in the next couple of years, but it was nice always thinking about that project, knowing like it'll probably happen sometime that it would boost us for a while. Carver Ridge was great for that too, so. So thinking through our current districts, thinking about our low density residential typically is R1 and R2. The medium density is R2 primarily in the traditional residential, so lots are a little bit smaller downtown, densities are higher. And then high density residential is R3. Mixed use would be a mix of our R2 district and R3, so think about mixed use as potentially retail bottom, living space above. And then just for reference, Carver Ridge density is 18.57 units per acre, which was 60 units on a pretty small site, but something to think about so you can think about high density, like what that project looks like of a site that hits about 19 units per acre. Okay, so what we know currently about our zoning, R2 is our most common zoning district. We use PRDs often, our housing stock is pretty similar, and our market is strong. So what does that look like long-term for our zoning districts? What thoughts do we have about R2, the use of PRDs? Dave caught me in a quick conversation today of if we go to more straight zoning and a PRD, like we have a little more capacity in our PRD process to request more things probably. So PRD should be a negotiation process where the developer says, if you give me smaller lot sizes and a reduced side yard setback, we'll give you X, Y, Z. My thought about flipping that script a little bit is if we boost our zoning district, that R2 is solid and it meets current market, current demand, and we work hard on our buffering and landscaping ordinances to increase those requirements. Across the board, we might get a product that currently feels like the PRDs that we're getting, but we're using straight zoning instead of the PRD process. So it's a lot to think about. It's a pretty technical brain process you have to go through thinking about a PRD. I don't have, like, this is not something, I don't have a conviction to go to straight zoning. It's helpful, it's clearer. I think we can make our code more usable for us and developers if we went to straight zoning, but absolutely open to some feedback. The planning commission was supportive of it to work towards going to straight zoning, knowing PRDs can absolutely still happen. Like if there is a strange project that requires it or something that we don't know about that could get a really neat new product in Carver, we absolutely could continue using it. Doesn't take it out of our toolbox, but it makes it less used than what we're doing right now. So I'll stop there if anyone has questions or feedback. That one's kind of the big chunky one.
You know, for me, and I think you kind of outlined these reasons, it seems like straight zoning would be more user-friendly, not only from the developer side of things, but also from the resident side of things, so that they can understand what their setbacks are, or whatever they may want to find. I know that we'll find ourselves in instances where we have residents who will go in and try to find the code, and they will be reading something or misinterpreting it, and it's easy to understand why. It's because it is in parts like written in Greek sometimes. So I like
What shall you mean?
Right.
but I think, you know, like at the end, that part that you said about kind of losing our negotiation power, that was the one thing that made me think like, oh, shoot. But like kind of the way you explained it, if we are able to change our requirements and, you know, make sure that those are really, really clear as well. And again, kind of going to that more user-friendly, more resident-friendly, more
Right.
development-friendly, I think that that's more straightforward. I think it also kind of on the political landscape, I think we all are aware of what happened last year at the state legislature where there was the housing bills, and the year before that and the year before that when they were trying to really clamp down on building permits and what we're doing as far as zoning and those kinds of things. I think it gives us a card to play if we're saying like, listen, we're already doing 5-foot minimum setbacks. We're already doing, 20-foot minimum setbacks of, whatever. We're not part of the problem, we're trying to be part of the solution. So I think that gives us kind of a good example to use as kind of being good partners, and just understanding just how tricky the market is right now. And I keep going back to that slide that you showed us years ago that was like 1 acre costs this much for infrastructure, costs this much for roads, it costs this much for pipes. So that's why you're not getting a brand new house that's $200,000. And when you were starting it, just like infrastructure alone, you were talking, I forget what the number was, but it was like $300,000 before you build a house on there. So I'm inclined to say like, let's, and because the planning commission recommends it, I'm inclined to say move towards straight zoning.
I'll also say, working in Carver now, the time that I have, I feel like our climate here has changed a little bit too. Like, when I first started, it felt like there was a little bit of a boom in 2018. We were seeing a lot of projects all at once, and that it's not typical that we've continued that boom. Like, there has not been a year that we're like, oh, we're not really working on anything. So it feels like we are growing up a little bit in our zoning code, that we can start to say like, this is what we're seeing, this is what we understand to be true about our market. And I like to think, and some feedback we've gotten is that Carver's really easy to work with. Like, we are a small team, which means you get pretty quick answers if you get one of us on the phone. But I think that would encourage that relationship to continue to say, we understand what you're looking for, we can meet you where you're at on some of this. So.
Oh, sorry.
I like the idea of also being able to add things like the buffers
For
or
sure.
landscape, because I feel like sometimes I just don't have like the visibility of, what that development would look like for, this one little cul-de-sac
Yep.
that's in the back of it. And I feel like so many of those times when we do ask the developers to do things, it's feedback from the residents.
Yes.
Which is great, but what if we had residents that just weren't engaged?
Right.
And so
Yep.
I think
And we
having that earlier in.
We do have buffering and landscape in our city code, but it definitely can be enhanced. Especially I think about major corridors, like thinking about projects that develop along 212, we often are kind of pulling teeth with the developer to get a berm along 212. It's typically noise from 212 that triggers that berming and buffering. But in my dreamiest city code, there's language that says if you're adjacent to Highway 212, you need to have XYZ for buffering and landscape day one, not even part of the negotiation. So if you want to develop in that area, knowing that berming and landscaping is required.
Yes to that,
That would-
because the residents who are building there aren't gonna realize how much noise and what quality of life impacts that has.
Yeah. Okay.
Chrissy? So I'll start down the PRD road for a second. So I've made it very known at many of our meetings that the PRD gets under my skin a little bit, because we have zoning code, and then on just about everything that comes in, we're slapping a PRD on it. So my irk with this is that if we have the regular zoning code, why are we not just enforcing it as the zoning code that we have in there? Now, if we look at something that's kind of a combination as we upgrade this, that the R2 and the PRDs, because I do agree that we've grown up as a city a little bit to where we kind of know what is happening. Every development comes in isn't, okay, this is brand new, what are we gonna do here, right? We've done this before a little bit. I would prefer to have a straight R2 that we can follow generally. Obviously, there's always an exception to every rule. We live on a bunch of hills here, so the things are gonna be different in different areas. But I am tired of seeing what looks like to me the exception to all the rules.
Sure.
And I mean, this is nothing new, I've said this many times before. Can we go back to the slide that has the comparison to the cities on it? This one, yep. And can you remind me, because the columns don't have,
Yeah, so the top is R1. It starts minimum lot size, lot width, front yard setback, side yard setback, rear yard setback.
Okay, and this is the one we're looking to move towards, or this is what we have now?
This is what we have today, so my biggest push would be for the R2 zoning district to change a bit. So minimum lot size would go to 5,000. We would keep the remainder with the exception of the side yard setback down to 5, so reduce from 7.5 to 5.
So I am absolutely not in favor of reducing the side yard setbacks. 5 feet is reach out and touch your neighbor. And I worry about other things as in fires, different things that happen, right? Because that can skip from house to house really quickly. There's nothing to me that says that 5 feet, from your property line. That's shorter than me, right? And then another one. So that's it between you and your neighbor. That is too close for comfort for me. For Carver, we have one chance to do this right, because once those houses are up, they're up forever. And I know that 2.5 feet maybe seems like something small to squabble about, but to me that every little foot you can get between homes is important. So I am not in favor of going down to 5 feet. And I'll make that very known, that's my stance on that for the rest of the council. But when it comes to when we go back to the R2, I think that if we have what we have set and then we don't grant below that except in special circumstances, this will become the norm because this is what we require. And that will just be the end of the story there unless there's an extenuating circumstance.
I will say, not that your concerns are not valid, but with the 5 yard side yard setback, sorry, 5
I know I
foot,
said R2.
you have to have a different fire rated wall for the 2 walls that share. So yes, fires can jump, absolutely, but there is some rest a little easier knowing that the walls have to be fire rated on the 2 sides that are close together.
Okay,
So,
that's good information to have, definitely. It does not change for me that we're stacking on top of each other in some of these developments. So again, I would be happier to stick at the 7.5 feet and have that be our standard, because I think aesthetically and realistically, when we say, well, this is what's selling, this is what's on, that's because that's all that's on the market, right? So I think from what I have heard from people who buy their houses, they certainly would love to have more size, but that's all there is. So we've got that one chance to do it right. So again, I'm just gonna say that I'm not in favor of going down to the 5 feet. There's a lot of things in here to go through. So after that, what does this look like for coming back? Like, you're gonna come back for some more? I'd like to go through this again for some more input, especially after our talk tonight. I kind of came in keeping a really open mind, really open slate to everything, and I'd like to dig a little bit deeper now that I've heard your presentation.
For sure.
Rather than say, okay, we've made all of our discussion points, send it back, and we're gonna.
And that was the goal, just keep it, the planning commission has gone like literally line by line, and it has taken us hours upon hours. We didn't want to do this in this work session, so.
Thank you.
Just some highlights.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions about the CBD downtown.
Yep,
But
I'm
do we
gonna
want
get
to
to
wait for that? Okay,
Yeah.
just gonna ask you to wait.
Yes.
I'm by that commercial business district, sorry, where there's so many different.
So I completely agree with Christy's concerns. That was my overall opinion of this, is that I'm really concerned about the city creating an area where residents are just stacked on top of each other as close as we can get them, especially if we remove PRDs and our ability to make sure that we have green spaces and trails in those communities as well. I don't want our new residents to be jammed in and not have the same amenities that we all love in the parts of the city that we're in already. Other than that, I have I'm glad to hear that we're gonna look at doing the landscaping ordinance as well. That was my biggest concern going through this, because we've even removed that section from the PRD section. All of the landscaping and everything, it just says PRD.
Oh, sure,
so
it's,
took all of that out. My next thing is, under what we have written down, it doesn't appear the generic office space is permitted in light industrial, but we talked last time about.
Pause.
Okay, nope, okay. Yeah, those are my big things.
Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling through some of these, but that was helpful for the R2 PRD discussion. Next, the planning commission has been talking a lot about accessory dwelling units, which I feel like you all are approached about quite a bit too. So offering more generational housing on a lot, so allowing an accessory dwelling unit that would be a separate, essentially like a,
Mother-in-law unit is what I like
yes,
to call it.
a granny flat is what they were called for a little while, so.
Legislature, they're called
Yeah, the planning commission feels pretty strongly that we should start thinking about the idea of an accessory dwelling unit to allow for, they're not cheap to put up, so I think saying greater housing affordability is kind of a scam because they're expensive, because you need a whole separate set of utilities, but that's a fish we can fry later.
So can we just go to that, they
Yeah.
must have utilities, it can't be like an office space that I have that's just a converted shipping container. It is, like,
No.
for this AUD, it absolutely must have
Plumbing,
utilities.
electricity.
In order to
Yes.
get a certificate of occupancy for someone to live in it, you have to have plumbing and all that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sewer,
Okay.
yep.
So general feedback, I know a lot of you are approached about it often.
I love it. I've been talking about this for so long.
You must have a mother-in-law you love.
So those,
We're being recorded.
I'm not married.
the work that we've been doing would allow them in the R1, R2, and then the traditional residential districts, obviously not R3 where it would be an apartment with an ADU behind it. So we'd be focusing on the residential district, so that seems like a pretty easy discussion to continue down that path.
And this, just like chickens, if there's an association that disallows it, those restrictions are greater than what we do at the city level.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, that was an easy
does
one.
the- Did we address, because I know that residents are gonna love the idea of having an ADU and then using it as a additional,
VRBO or something, yeah.
have we addressed that?
We don't have restrictions in our city code. I would say that's worked favorably for people that are offering their homes, like the Airbnb above Getaway, Josh has one downtown. There are a couple throughout town and they historically haven't been an issue for us.
Okay, and but that's allowed in our current,
Correct.
okay.
Okay, we'll continue down that path on that one. We'll cruise through a little bit. Next up is the commercial industrial zoning district. So on our comp plan, it's purple. We don't have that district in our city code. So when people call and they say, I'm interested in your commercial industrial district, what does that mean? We don't have it right now. So this would add it, which would be great to have it as an option. So it's the purple areas. Language from the proposed code allows for employment areas that may develop as a mix of typical industrial commercial users. So thinking about like Lakeview would fall into this since it's an office and light manufacturing space. The projects that we're starting to see along JCP, so like the United Properties piece that they're proposing, the two buildings would fall into that category. So allowing the same typical projects that we've been seeing and being excited about, but actually establishing a district for those.
How did we fit
Projects
them
and
in
areas.
before? Because it was just commercial or industrial.
Correct.
So how did we make that work for like Lakeview then?
Lakeview is light industrial, which is in our city code.
Okay.
All right, number 4, there are some changes to commercial districts. So gateway commercial would be intentional zoning of property directly adjacent to Jonathan Carver Parkway. So this started at the planning commission level when we were getting some questions from residents about the Les Schwab project that came in. Why are we doing Les Schwab instead of a grocery store? What does the city really need it? And it was in our freeway commercial district and it was a permitted use. So the planning commission, we took a step back and said, let's be a little bit more thoughtful about the gateways of our community. So thinking about where people enter our community, where they travel often, what they see. I know the city council also did a lot of work on the Les Schwab project to make it feel a little bit more commercial than it did day one. So thinking about that differently, creating a zoning district of gateway commercial, so anything directly adjacent to JCP would have a different zoning district with some additional regulations and like bulk material, so thinking about what a project looks like. So we would enhance that it might need to be stone or brick or hardy board siding only. So thinking about the gateways in our community, thinking about where people, not only residents, but people traveling through, making a different zoning district for those important corridors that I think we all are realizing how important they are as Carver continues to grow. Central Business District, making it specific to our historic downtown. So the HBC obviously does a ton of good work, but I would like to mirror those two processes a little bit closer. That the Central Business District also needs to adhere to the HBC regulations, so thinking about that. And then right now we don't have a general commercial district. We've been using freeway commercial as our like general commercial district. So Children of Tomorrow, or to be Kids, sorry. Mizzy's Pizza, Carver Dental, those are all guided freeway commercial. and frankly, they're not adjacent to a freeway, so thinking about a general commercial district that could get us there. And then thinking about gateway commercial, so some important sites that we would think about, right when you come up off the exit at 212, so at 212 and GCP, along the strip on Carver Commons, so it wouldn't be the entire site, it would just be properties directly adjacent to Jonathan Carver Parkway, so we could set acreage that is the first 200 feet adjacent to Jonathan Carver Parkway, so thinking about that area. And then a couple more in our future growth areas, we continue to move both west and south. Again, the general commercial district, get rid of us using freeway commercial in places that it's probably not appropriate just based on what the language calls for. Okay, I got through all the slides. We're looking for some feedback. We'll pause on the commercial stuff. So give me feedback, thoughts, comments, etc.
Taylor, you wanna go first on this one, or what do you?
Yeah.
The last for.
Yeah, no, I mean, if we'll pause,
We got a bunch
the
of-
comments that I made about the residential are the comments I already made. Otherwise, everything is, my concerns are with, some of my other concerns or questions are about, commercial and industrial, so I'll pause those until we address those directly.
No, that's right now. Don't
Oh, that's
pause
right now.
anymore.
Okay, we're unpausing those. Okay, so, under what we've written here, it appears that generic office space is not permitted in light industrial, generic office space.
Okay.
The way that it's written right now, it appears that it says that, only office space that's ancillary to industrial is
Sure.
allowed in that spaces. And I know we talked about in United Properties that they are looking to possibly do generic office in there as well, so I would be concerned about that. We talked about green spaces. Yeah, that was my biggest thing.
Okay.
There's some wording problems, but that'll
Yeah.
be cleaned up as we go, so I'm not worried about that. Give me a final draft and I'll start nitpicking.
I really like the idea of the commercial district,
Good.
especially that slide that is 22 out of 68 where it, big picture, there's 5 areas that we could say, well, yes, this is for sale, you could build it, but oh wait, we have this checklist and
Yeah.
we're trying to plan this out. Okay, I just want to kind of say that back to make sure I understood it.
You got it.
Could it be as specific as just Trader Joe's?
I would love that, but.
Okay. Gets us closer. Okay. Chrissy.
Okay, so when I was looking through the downtown business district, I was wondering why we're so specific on permitted uses. Now, I realized before, because we're having here like retail establishments such as, finance, insurance, real estate service. It seems like an exhaustive list, but it also seems like a list of things that are already here.
Sure.
So, it seems overly specific
Do you
to
want
me.
to broaden?
Yeah, it is, and not for, I don't think it's going to do much, but for me, it just seems like it's a lot of unnecessary wording
Yeah.
to read through on a long enough document.
And a lot of that feels kind of antiquated, like we've had so many conversations at planning commission about what a brew pub versus a brewery, like, there's just,
Yeah, but personal services, laundry, barber, shoe
Sure.
repair,
I haven't seen
I
one of
know,
those for like 10
photography
years.
studio, so anyways.
Cobbler.
Yeah.
That's what I call them.
In the downtown, that would be appropriate, but no, so anyways, I would like to just broaden it, I don't think there's we're not, if, under general laws, there's nothing that we're going to stop from coming in here anyways. So, what,
Well, keep in mind, if it's not listed as a permitted use,
Right.
it's presumed to be prohibited. The
Okay.
only caveat with that though is similar uses from a land use perspective, it would be hard to say no to, right? So if you have 100 things listed, one of them is a nail salon, but you don't have a hair salon, those are very similar from a land use perspective, right? You have
Yeah,
a service
yeah.
industry where
Mhm.
people are coming into,
Mhm.
and so I think it would be hard for us to say you can't exist here, hair salon, and we
Right.
say nail salon does exist. But
Yeah.
but a lot of cities rely on the fact that a certain use isn't listed specifically as a way to prohibit that use and say that that's not something we allow in our zoning district. And so you want to be a little careful about how you craft
Sure.
But I
But
can
we-
take that list and broaden it
For sure,
to the point
yeah.
of.
Let's
I don't
broaden it.
disagree with that.
We already have things like,
Yeah.
there's some of the, like, let's say sex-based industries, like strip clubs and
Yep.
things like that are already
Prohibited,
banned,
yep.
prohibited in our ordinance, correct?
Well, you can't. prohibit
Downtown.
them. Downtown, you can.
Downtown,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Anyways, okay, thank you,
Yep.
and thank you, we'll broaden it a little bit.
Yep.
Right mark here.
Am I reading this correctly that we don't have a section right now for general commercial as the proposed draft is?
Correct.
Okay, so we would propose that we include that in a new,
Yes.
because we've got a section here for gateway, I'm seeing a section for gateway, and I'm
Yeah.
seeing a section for freeway, but I'm not seeing a section for general.
I might have gotten lost in translation.
Yeah, or it just could have got, it's a long document, it could have just gotten missed, just went missing, which is totally fine, I'm just not seeing it.
Okay, so, if we go to, on the next page then, if, L, so it talks about the outdoor sidewalk cafe. So when we're talking about timing for that, that is literally just the ones that we permit on the front sidewalks. It doesn't include like
Right.
behind the doghouse or behind Lisa's or.
Those would be patios, but the, like, Harvey's is a sidewalk cafe.
Okay,
It'd have to be in the public right away.
gotcha, okay. So another one here that was a little bit overly, furniture will be washable, constructed of metal, plastic, or other weather-resistant materials. Why are we calling out what someone's materials are
Is
gonna
that the
be?
sidewalk cafe or not?
Well, it's under 50-64, and it's just all this length here.
I've
Yeah.
seen some
Sorry, what was
What
that?
page are you on?
Well, I
31.
have it printed out, so I'm on page 32 on my printed out copy.
It's, outdoor sidewalk cafe permitted is on page 31 of the proposed ordinance.
Yep, I'm good. Christie
Okay.
just said it was 30.
And if we don't need to go this far in detail, if you wanna
Right.
send me your notes,
Sure.
we can hash
But
through some of it.
Yeah, so.
I
just
think-
comment here.
I don't know if Carver has had this problem, but I know some cities have allowed this, and when you start to allow furniture that can absorb water or can't absorb water, and it gets moldy, disgusting, gross, you're gonna have blight issues downtown, so with sidewalk cafes, they don't want you to go find a couch and put it, I'm serious.
No, I believe- no,
There
no,
are,
no, no, no.
there are some
Pictured a bunch of
establishments, and I don't think any in Carver would do this, but if you have a provision there, then you can't do it. So I think that's probably the reason for that. You wanna make sure that the furniture isn't gonna get moldy, gross, and, because it's outside, right? That's my guess, I
Okay.
could be wrong, but.
That's what the council wanted at the time.
Yeah.
That ordinance is like 5 or 6 years old. or
Yeah,
something.
that's why it was.
It
just
seems to me,
looking
and
for it,
correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that we simply ported chapter 10 into this, because we have a section in the code as it is now that is it's outside of our zoning that's specific to outdoor cafes, and it sounds like we've just ported that into the zoning, is that correct?
I think it was the other way around.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
It was in our zoning, and I
Yeah.
said, don't put it there.
And it got
because
pulled out?
When you put things in your zoning code, you're admitting that when you change it, grandfathering issues happen, but if it's in a business regulation, then that problem doesn't
Okay.
exist.
And that's
So
probably our issue now, is that we haven't fully codified our ordinance to take it out of 50 yet.
that was the goal,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
talked about doing it with this
Yep.
rewrite.
I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, according to the website that has all of our municipal codes, it's a separate section.
Yeah, so we'll pull it out
Right.
of 50,
Yeah.
we'll keep it in.
And the goal is to eventually bring it down to
Okay,
50.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see here. And so the zoning lot requirements and standards that are on the next page for this, those are what are currently here, nothing's been changed to that
In which district?
in the CPD?
No.
Okay.
I anticipate that the HPC will do a little revision work in the central business district,
Okay,
if they so choose, but they'll be the reviewing agency for that section.
okay, that's all I had.
My feedback is a little bit more high level. I love the idea of freeway commercial. I'm on board with that.
Gateway?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, gateway commercial. Yes. As far as commercial industrial, really good that we have code for that section now. I do have, and I can probably just email you or share you, like
That'd be
just
great.
some nits. But I'm just kind of wondering, for readability, I know that there are like, the chat GPTs where you can like put it through and kind of make sure that is this at a second grade reading
Sure.
level or whatever. And there are just a few nits of like still lots of thereafters that are in there that might be a little bit confusing because again, like I want this to be something that any resident
Your
can
nephew
read
could read,
and
yeah.
understand. My nephew could read, my dad could read it, someone who English might not be their first language
Sure.
can read it and understand.
I
So
haven't used ChatGPT, this might be a fun first.
I don't know that I don't know that ChatGPT is the, well, maybe you could put
Yeah.
it in and be like, rewrite this and
Yeah,
put it in
totally.
a second grade reading level. I'm sure
Yeah.
you could do that with ChatGPT, but I think there are also specific
Yeah.
stuff.
I also like getting more eyes on it, having Brent and Natalie go through it more as, like, and allowing just like go nuts on it, I think will help too.
Dave, do we run into any precedent issues if we start to change some of that language?
If we're just changing readability, no, it's not gonna create problems. I mean, one thing I'd remind everybody about too is, what the city code is, it is legislation. And, when we look at state statutes, it's got those, thereafters, and it's got some of that legalese that's a pain in the butt, and it's like, oh, how pretentious was this person who wrote this, right?
Right.
But on the same or on the other side of the coin, it's like, you also wanna make sure that it's clear, enforceable, that a judge is gonna look at it if we have to sue somebody
Yeah.
or charge somebody with a crime. So there's like a balance, you kinda wanna.
Yeah, I was anticipating
Tightrope
that.
there.
That's what you were gonna say.
I like the readability goal, but I also think we have to make sure to keep that other part in mind too.
Yeah.
I ask because my field of law, there's a difference between consisting of and comprising, like a legal difference between those two phrases, so
Yeah,
I always ask.
there's a lot of things that when we write code, it's, I would write it a little differently than I would maybe a memo to residents or something
Yeah.
that I know is who the audience is, but really with the audience here, it's gonna be your police officers, your judges, your attorneys who are gonna have to enforce it, and then explain it to residents. You don't wanna make it, hard to understand, but at the same time, you have to make sure that what you're trying to accomplish is accomplished in words.
Sure.
So it's tricky.
At the end of the day, I want this to be enforceable and not get us into trouble and, for those audiences that you were talking about, make it make sense to them. But if there's anything that we could do to make it just a little bit more easy to read and
Yep.
understand,
I totally
that would be
agree.
fantastic.
I like that. Yep.
So, that is it for my feedback. The one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning was just a huge thank you to you and the planning commission for going through all of this. This is not fun. This is dull. This is boring, but I attended a couple of meetings where you guys were doing this and you made it fun and the planning commission was laughing and exchanging jokes with one another. Like, you really made this fun, and especially when it was a really lovely June evening, or whatever it was, and these folks were stuck inside council chambers for 2 or 3 hours. Like, they did a lot of really hard work. Krista Goodell has been fantastic, but everybody contributed. I've just watched meetings of, you're like, oh, Krista, where did I forget a comma? Like, everybody has been fantastic, and this is a lot of hard work, so thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask a final question? So if we do have more feedback on this, what's the appropriate way to wait to the next work session? Can we send it to staff?
Let Erin decide that.
Okay.
If it's like small nitpicky micro things, I would love to get it not in this room just because I could drag the conversation down. And I
You want to hear
suspect
about
you.
my comments?
So we're gonna keep cleaning up the draft. Let's maybe get it back in front of you another time. We'll work through some of the things we discussed tonight. And then if it's nitpicky, I'd love to get it in an email. If it's high level topic that should be discussed, I think should happen here.
Possibly send it though so that you can have a list of those high level ones so you can
Yeah, for
pinpoint
sure.
those in a presentation back
That'd
to
be
us. Okay,
And I can share it with Brent, you can share it with the rest of the council of what I'm working on.
sounds good, thank you.
When we get to the point of nitpicky, could you share a Word document so that
Yeah,
we can do try changes?
for sure.
Okay. All right,
That was
right.
perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
For you.
Okay, so just as an explanation, we always try to allow 10 minutes before our meetings. So we are going to push the parking and vehicle operation regulations to the council meeting. I will try to rejigger the order of things so that we can get to you guys sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Guys, and that you've been here for the better part of the last hour and a half. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Motion by Councilmember Mock, second by Councilmember Sayer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Thank you guys for your patience. I appreciate it.
Sure, so you're taking it.
So we're
Making 10.
gonna get